I've been doing this Humanistic Judaism thing for a long time. I actually started working for some variety of Humanistic Judaism in some capacity the summer after I graduated high school in 1993 as a summer intern organizing recordings or paper. I don't even remember what I did. It was a long time ago. And I kept working over the summers. I became a rabbinic intern in 1996. Not a good time to have the title intern if you remember what was happening in the political sphere in the 1990s with interns. But it was a good experience, and obviously it took. I've been doing it ever since. But for the longest time, I was always the young one. I was the kid. Well, this past May, we ordained 2 new rabbis, both of whom were younger than me. We ordained a new madrich, a new leader, who was somewhat older than me. He's a retired librarian. And we ordained 8 new life cycle officiants, which was a program that didn't even exist when I started working, and many of them were also younger than me. So it's a good transition point, I think, when you're no longer the young one. It's better than being the superannuated one, but it's certainly an appropriate transition point in our movement as well as in my connection to the movement. But in that long time, that 30-some years I've been involved in Humanistic Judaism, there's a story I've heard over and over again. Someone comes and visits, comes to an evening with the rabbi, has a conversation with me, visits a service, watches a video, hears a podcast, and they say, "This is wonderful. I've felt this way for years, and I never knew you existed." And there's part of me that says, "Great." And there's part of me that says, "Ugh, why did it take so?" We've been here. I've been doing this for 30 years. Why is it happening again and again? I've never even thought, but we're here. We're here. Why haven't more people found us? Well, on one level, a humanistic Judaism is inconceivable. And when I use that word, it does mean what I think it means. People think Judaism is a religion. And if you're not religious, maybe you can be Jewish, but there's not enough of people like that to actually make a Jewish community of these non-religious Jews, or to make a Judaism that speaks to non-religious Jews, because Judaism is religion and religious, and religion is about God. They don't even know what to look for. They don't even think it's worth bothering looking at all, because they're not going to find it. They imagine they have to make it up from scratch, and every few years you'll see an article on Huffington Post or Hey Alma or some other website where a contributor writes in and says, "I had no idea how to do Passover since I don't believe in God, so I made it up myself." One Google search, maybe 2. We're there, we've been there, but people don't even think it's possible, and so they feel like they have to reinvent the wheel every time. A second challenge for us is that belonging to a Jewish community is about many factors. I've shared this story before about the Jewish atheist who's getting dressed up to go to synagogue, and his son says to him, "Dad, what are you doing? You don't believe any of that stuff." And his father said, "Well, son, you know my friend Schwartz? He goes to synagogue to talk to God. I go to talk to Schwartz." So if people are going to talk to Schwartz and don't care about the God stuff, then they're joining the synagogue. They're attending for other reasons. It's for social connection. It's for a sense of community. It's for the food or the drinks or any number of other factors. For some, it's the view of the lake. Most Jews do not prioritize beliefs or philosophy or consistency over these social factors. And so they don't think to look anywhere. They have low expectations for the content of the services. Now, historically, if you went back 20, 30 years, there was a lot of rejectionism of humanistic Judaism, or simply indifference by mainstream religious Judaisms. We weren't considered part of the conversation, not big enough to bother, not relevant enough to a religious Judaism. We weren't real in many communities because we didn't have sizable congregations with regular meeting spaces and websites and all those things. We were a little chavurah here and there, and we didn't have a large presence in St. Louis or in Houston or Las Vegas or other growing Jewish communities, so we're not real there. We're just in theory. You know, 3 people getting a magazine doesn't make a community. And why bother talking about a theoretical possibility, especially if you have a suspicion that a quarter of your membership are actually secretly in sympathy with that humanistic approach. So you wouldn't necessarily want to bring it up. In some cases, humanistic Judaism hasn't passed the credibility threshold. Is it enough Hebrew for the Israelis who otherwise are secular, but they want Hebrew as part of their Jewish celebration, as part of their Jewish expression? Do we have a building for those who like a sense of an established community, or at least regular meeting space? Are we always meeting in people's houses or shifting where we're meeting all the time? Do we have to send an email out 3 times a week letting you know where we're going to be for a particular event? And by the way, Kol Hadash started that way. We had board meetings in one place and services somewhere else, and I had a home office. Starbucks was a great place to meet, but it doesn't give you credibility. Maybe it's a chicken and egg challenge in a community. Are you large enough to have leadership? But if you don't have leadership, how can you grow? So how do you get over that hump? What we do in a humanistic congregation is both similar to traditional practice, lighting Shabbat candles, and different from traditional practice, lighting a menorah, sharing wine, but with humanistic blessings. So the question is, what's the sweet spot of being similar to traditional practice, but also different and distinct in our own way? Because if we're only traditional, why bother with something different? If we're totally different, it doesn't seem familiar. And of course, everyone has a different tolerance level or experience level or desire for Hebrew, for music, for sing-along versus performative, for moments of silence, responsive readings. There's all kinds of variables for taste. One of our challenges has been, what kind of personalities are interested in a humanistic Jewish congregation? We often get people who are interested in ideas. We tend to get people who like prose more than poetry. Not always, some people like the poetry. We are definitely people who, if you had to pick between facts and spirituality, would tend to the fact side, even if they do have emotional, what we might call spiritual needs. And I haven't done a survey, but I suspect we tend to draw introverts more than extroverts. I'm not sure exactly why, but that's a challenge when you're trying to do outreach. Because if you have introverts, they're not the ones that want to walk in the parade, they want to go to the farmer's market, they want to tell all their friends about it. This is for them. And if you find it, fine. But they're not out there in front. Social media? Oh. And the last challenge we have is our target market. We want to attract secular free thinkers, people who make up their own minds, and have them join a community that's telling them what to think. I mean, we're not dogmatic about our non-dogmatic approach, but we're sharing ideas, and we're singing songs together, and we're saying words together, and for some secular free thinkers, that gives them the willies. It's too religious. I love it when someone tells me I'm too religious. I know what I think. I know what I do. But for them, this is all too religious. I once had an experience shortly after I came to Kol Hadash. There was an article about us in the Chicago Tribune. After Sherwin Wine had died, I'd taken over the work with the Institute, and so we did a press release. They did a nice profile of us. And after that article ran, somebody called us because they were interested in hearing more about what we did. And so I was talking with this woman, and she said, well, I generally like what you stand for, but I'm not a fan of organized religion. I said to her, well, first of all, we're not that organized. But secondly, if only all the people who didn't like organized religion would actually join something, then you'd have critical mass and a voice and credibility and be able to create things together and have a sense of shared purpose and even a community of like-minded people who don't necessarily think alike, who can celebrate together, who can feel part of the Jewish people by being with other Jewish people. But that's our problem. Our target market are the people who don't join things. So how do we get over that hump? Now, one could argue that we are on the verge of a golden age of growth in humanistic Judaism. Let me give you some of the good signs that you might read as a sign of positive progress. The first is, and this is a demographic detail, the growth of a group that surveyors call Jews of no religion. So the Pew Forum on Religion in American Life does periodic surveys of religious attitudes, beliefs, practices, and they did a major survey of American Jews in 2013, which was repeated again in 2020. And they asked the people who answered the phone these questions. What religion are you? If they said Jewish, they were listed as Jewish by religion. If they said, I'm not religious, they were then asked, do you consider yourself Jewish in some other way? And if they said yes, then they counted as a Jew of no religion, because they're not religious, but they do consider themselves Jewish in some way. Now, of the entire American Jewish population, what percent would you guess are Jews of no religion as of 2020? It's about 27%, about a quarter of all American Jews said they were not religious, but they're Jewish in some other way. But if you went to the ages 18 to 29 group, 40% of the 18 to 29s said they were not religious, but they did consider themselves Jewish in some other way. And for the age 30 to 49 group, it's 33%. The older ones were more willing to say their religion was Jewish. But don't forget, plenty of them are potential humanistic Jews too. Because we're used to, you're filling out a survey. What's your religion? I guess Jewish. So there's plenty of our potential in there too. That's even more than the people who said they weren't religious, but were still Jewish in some way. When you ask about what people believe and how they identify, 1/3 of American Jews are not Reform, not Orthodox, not conservative. They're no particular denomination. They're just Jewish in their own way. And there's also a category called miscellaneous. 4% were miscellaneous, but that includes us. They actually asked about us in the survey. But we were, 0.5%. So they lumped us in with the miscellaneous, which is also where Reconstructionist Judaism is, by the way. So don't feel bad. When you ask what people think, 1/5, 20% of American Jews say they do not believe in the God of the Bible and do not believe in a higher power or spiritual force. They were given 3 choices. Do you believe in the God of the Bible? Do you believe in a higher power or spiritual force, kind of nebulous, karma kind of thing? Or do you not believe in either of those and you just do not believe? 20%, 1/5 of American Jews said no. We say, yes, these are our potential people. So, and that population has grown over the years of the survey. So that's one sign of light. A second positive sign is the general secularization of the broader society. We hear a lot about evangelical Jews and evangelical Christians and people pushing their religion in the public square, but in the general population, the proportion of people who call themselves none of the above, it's called the growth of the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. The nuns represent now 28% of the population. They're larger than the percent of the population that's Catholic or that's evangelical Protestant. The largest single group are the nuns, the ones who are not any particular religion. Now, they're not all atheists. They might believe in a kind of freelance God, but they're not identified with a particular religious tradition. And it's also secularization in theology and practice, not just in denominational claiming. 1/3 of all Americans say that religion is not too important or not at all important in their lives. That's 1/3 of the population. Only 1/3 of Americans as a whole attend religious services monthly. Monthly, that's, cutting them some slack there. You see, there's even been a key piece of evidence in my own experience. When I was growing up, you never had sporting events on Sunday morning because that was Sunday school time and church time. Guess when youth soccer has begun to colonize? It is starting on Sunday mornings because fewer people take their church or synagogue or Sunday school seriously enough that it becomes a barrier. So that's a sign of society secularizing, which in theory is good news, right? The more secular people, the more potential people in a humanistic congregation. We've also found, in terms of the hostility of the surrounding community, for a long time we kept getting the question, how can you be Jewish if you don't believe in God? How is that possible? People don't ask that question very much anymore, partly because they know so many Jews who don't believe in a God or don't care that much about it. The willingness to accept Judaism separate from religion is growing. 2/3 of American Jews say that someone can be Jewish if they don't believe in God. So that bridge has been crossed. We've also found a normalization of intermarriage and intermarried families that are increasingly making Jewish choices. We used to be one of the only games out there of rabbis who would officiate at intermarriages, or communities that would accept couples where one partner was not Jewish and let them both be members and let their kids be fully welcome in the community. It was a niche market for us for a time. Well, that's gone by the wayside. People are more and more open and welcoming to accepting intermarried families, and that population has grown. Between 2010 and 2020, 60% of the Jews who got married a non-Jewish partner. It's over half now. And 80% of intermarried parents are raising their kids some variety of Jewish. Could be Jewish by religion, or partly Jewish by religion and partly something else, or Jewish by culture. But 80% of those Jewish with a non-Jewish partner spouse are raising kids some variety of Jewish connection. So it's not a demographic dead end, as people used to say. And the Jewish community has responded by having more and more rabbis willing to officiate at those weddings. Rabbi Dan Friedman would sometimes do 20 weddings in a weekend. I might do 3 if I'm really busy, because there are just more rabbis out there willing to do it. Plus, you can get a friend ordained on the internet, and they'll do it, for a lot cheaper. And also quality maybe, not as high. But the reality is that the Jewish community is so much more open and welcoming of these individuals, and that's a good sign, because that's who we are and have been for many years. And often, many of the partners in those interfaith partnerships are not particularly religious either. They found that non-Jewish partners of Jewish intermarriages rarely go to church, rarely pray. They have a Christmas tree at home in a cultural way. They might go to an Easter brunch with their family, right? It's a family thing, it's a cultural thing, it's not a religious thing. When I talk about being a cultural Jew to couples getting married, half the time the Christian partner says, oh yeah, that's me. It's the Christmas tree, not the nativity scene. It's the Easter bunny, not the passion story. That's not who they are. I sometimes describe these couples as interfaithless, because neither one is particularly religious, but they're from different cultural or religious heritages. And finally, there's an asset now. 30 years ago, when I first started working in Humanistic Judaism, there was no Google. There was no smartphone. I remember the fall after my summer, after graduating high school, I got my first email address. That was news. But now we have smartphones, and you can get chipped in your head if you want to and search things. I mean, there's all kinds of options out there to find us. We have a global reach. We have a permanent YouTube presence. People will watch this video until civilization falls, right? It'll be out there. I've had to work over the last several years to take materials that Sherwin-Wine wrote and were printed from a typewritten copy to a mimeographed sheet, or that were recorded on audio cassette. We've been digitizing and digitizing and digitizing. So now it's available. You can go to sherwinwine.com and get hundreds of articles and hear thousands of audio lectures. But the process of making it available was so laborious. And now it's so easy, and it's so plentiful, and it's out there for anybody to search and ideally to find. Well, there's all these positive signs, right? We're due for a golden age. I should stop talking right now. Well, the reality is, to quote Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, on the other hand, there's always another hand. Remember, many of those factors I mentioned before are still true, why people don't find us. For some people, this is inconceivable to even look for something like that. That's still true. Belonging to the Jewish community is about the social stuff. It's about the carpools on Sunday morning. You would not believe how many families we had not joined our community because of the carpool issue. That credibility threshold and the secret sauce, what's the sweet spot? Well, we're still working on that. And as I said, our audience are secular freethinkers who don't join things, so we're still trying to sell to that audience. We have to sell them on the possibility of joining anything, of being anything, of identifying with a group, and then maybe looking at us. Will non-religious people actually join, or are they just going to dabble, like the Jewish equivalent of web surfing or TikTok scrolling, right? Oh, we'll look at this, and I'll look at this, I'll watch this video for 15 minutes, and then I'll go do something else. Why join? I can dabble. It may be the case that increasing internet programming means less reason to join, because you can watch high-quality video and audio and music and aesthetics any time of day, any state of dress. It doesn't matter. So why join anything? And we still have the challenge of identification in an era where people make up their own identities, may not feel the need to join a group at all. We're post-denominational in the Jewish world. People say, I'm just Jewish, or I do it my own way, or I may go to an Orthodox synagogue, but I eat non-kosher food when I'm out of the house, and you sort of mix and match. You're picking how you're observing, and maybe you want to do yoga one day, and maybe you want to go to Jewish meditation the next day, and maybe you want kugel one night, and maybe you want Chinese food the next night. You're making your choices from a smorgasbord of options, and to pick one community that you do all your Jewish things in one way all the time, it may not be with the zeitgeist. So what do I project? Well, I was asked to talk about the future of humanistic Judaism. I'm going to give you 4 key questions. 4 questions, sounds Jewish, right? I'm going to give you 4 key questions that will decide what direction we go. The first question, and it goes back to what we just did early in May, can we produce enough new leaders and rabbis so that we have that visibility, that credibility in local communities? We want to be real. And so now that we have another new young rabbi in Los Angeles and another new young rabbi in Minneapolis, in those communities, people will see them do weddings. They will see them participate in Jewish community panels and discussions. They'll be at the Jewish cultural fairs. They'll be leading services for their community. They'll lead bar and bat mitzvahs that other people will come to and see. They become more real because they have that leadership that's visible, that's organized, that's articulate, and that's talented. That will make us more real. And it's a long process. It's incremental growth. I don't expect a lightning bolt to come down with a huge PR flash. We need people who are talented and charismatic and committed, but it will take time for those to be trained and to be disseminated and to get their roots in their communities. We're in a better place now than we were 10, 15 years ago, because we didn't have the leaders and rabbis that have been ordained since that time out there in the field doing their work and impressing people, and more importantly, impressing the Jewish world with what humanistic Judaism can do. We have a book that will be published by the Jewish Publication Society that's coming out in January. It's an anthology of contemporary humanistic Jewish thought. It's edited by myself and another rabbi in our community. And it will be a milestone for our movement, because the Jewish Publication Society is a very reputable and credible publisher. This is part of their Modern Jewish Thought series, so we'll be on the shelf with humanistic Judaism next to Reform and Orthodox and Conservative, and then they're hoping to get a Reconstructionist volume out too, but we're there. We're on that panel. We've made the list. And maybe in other seminaries or in study groups, there'll be people who learn about our movement through this anthology. It's a very important step forward, but it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to all of a sudden make everyone know who we are and what we stand for and grow our communities by leaps and bounds and lightning bolts. The second question: as synagogue membership settles down in a lower plateau, now it's about 30 to 40% of American Jews that are members of synagogues, not the 60 to 70% that it was a generation ago. Now that we're on this lower plateau, will the result be more bitter competition between the synagogues that have survived the merger and acquisition phase of synagogue growth and development? Or will there be more acceptance, since we're in the same boat as everybody else? You know, we're on the side of affiliated Jews, believe it or not. We're part of the establishment here, because we have people who've joined a community. And that's the minority experience in the American Jewish world today. So will that mean that I and my other rabbis can talk about our challenges in dealing with membership and size and growth and critical mass and so on, and we commiserate, as opposed to hating each other bitterly and railing against each other because we're a threat one to the other with a shrinking pie? Well, we'll have to see, and it might depend on different personalities. When I was in high school, I went to a Jewish community youth group umbrella planning board. I was a little trepidatious about how would I be accepted there, because we were a bit of the black sheep in the Detroit Jewish community, as you can imagine, in the early 90s. And one of the organizers of this community said something that was perfect for me. She said, from my perspective, there are people who are committed to their Jewishness and people that aren't committed. And if you're here, then you're committed. And how you're committed doesn't matter. That's your choice. And I thought that was, I felt really comforted by that because that was the value. So maybe we have more in common with those other affiliated Jews, despite our theological or practical differences, and we can share that ground to build and go forward, and then they'll see us as a legitimate partner going forward as well. The third challenge, or question, let's say, will the ongoing secularization of society and of Jewish life, of practice and belief, will that growing secularization mean that more Jews who come from an organized Jewish community and like the benefits of that, they like the social groups, they like the community service, they like an inspiring rabbi and leader, will they then look for something different that fits who they really are, that fits their beliefs and practices? Or will the fact that we're the minority, we who are members of a community, will the fact that more and more people are doing freelance bar mitzvahs and friends are doing their weddings, the fact that they have less and less connection to a Jewish community, will that mean that we have to shift what we do? Yes, a community for those who want it, but maybe more episodic service provider instead of a community holding a service every week. We'll be the dabble, we'll be the drive-through. And that's how people will get their Jewishness, and if that's what they want, then maybe we have to find a way to serve that as well. I mean, it could be a yes and, right? We have community for those who want it, and we have services for those who don't, and we find the right balance so that we stay solvent and we stay meaningful to those who want both. The one variable in this one, on the ongoing secularization, the sort of centrifugal split apart or come together, is the question of anti-Semitism. You know, we're in the last of several months of what it seemed to be a growth in the expression and impact of anti-Semitism on American Jewish communities, on campuses and in other places. And we don't know what the long-term trajectory of that will be. Will it die down if the conflict in Gaza dies down, or is it something that is now part of the landscape? And what effect will that have on Jewish identification? Will people run for the hills and want nothing to do with the Jewish community? Will those who have sympathy with the Palestinians find the organized Jewish community something they want to leave far, far behind because of the reactions and the tension between those two groups? We don't know where that's going to go. And that could lead to more people identifying. We had people join our congregation because they felt they wanted to be somewhere after October 7th. And we've had other people who may have decided, you know what, I don't need this anymore. We even had one person who had joined for a year who left because they wanted to join a more anti-Zionist Jewish community, which is up to them. We allow people to make up their own minds, but we also allow people to make up their own minds, which was not what they wanted. So this is the ongoing challenge of the current moment, and what impact it will have, we don't quite know. And the fourth question. As Jewish identity moves on, it's becoming increasingly de-ethnicized in America. 25 years ago, Rabbi Daniel Friedman, our Rabbi Emeritus, wrote a very thought-provoking book called Jews Without Judaism. And he was exploring what does it mean when the ethnic experience of growing up speaking a Jewish language, living in a Jewish neighborhood, only eating Jewish foods with Jewish people around you all the time, having most of your public school be Jewish. What happens when that begins to fade? And Jewish identity is cultural, but not as intense as an immigrant ethnic experience. You know, when you're the third and the fourth generation. I did a wedding for a couple. The Jewish partner was the bride. The groom was James Lopez. Didn't speak any Spanish at all. Because he's 3 generations after the immigration moment, and Spanish wasn't part of his lived heritage. And so we're getting to that stage among the Jewish population as well. Also remember, there are plenty of people who are becoming Jewish. They don't have childhood memories of lighting Hanukkah candles. They don't have inherited Kiddush cups that go back generations. They don't have that ethnic experience. They're joining a cultural community. They're joining the Jewish family. In some cases, they're joining a religious ideology. But they're coming at it without that ethnic background. And so that also changes how ethnic the Jewish community is. And of course, plenty of people are partners of people who are Jewish. They came along for the ride. And maybe they eventually identify that way themselves. Maybe they don't. We don't make any rules. And then what do their children feel? How do they identify? The children of intermarriage and adoption and all these varieties of Jewish faces. If we can let go of the concept of looking Jewish, what implication does that have for how people connect to being Jewish? Humanistic Judaism started as a movement of cultural Jews who wanted to connect to their ethnic and family heritage through a humanistic philosophy. But if we don't have that deeply rooted ethnic and family heritage, what is the basis for our Jewish cultural connection? And will we be able to shift enough to appeal to that newly de-ethnicized or newly Jewish audience that's growing more and more every day? Can we celebrate both and? Again, can it be both your family heritage for those who have it and your adopted heritage for those who are joining the community? Well, I sort of lied. I actually have 5 questions. But after all, the traditional 4 questions has a 5th question too. It asks, why is this night different from all other nights? Before going to the 4th question, there's an overarching question. And the overarching question, just like why is this night different, is humanistic Judaism still different, still meaningful at the quarter mark of the 21st century? In Passover speak, why is this Judaism different from all other Judaisms? There's a lot of reasons why we're different and meaningful and important. We offer the joy of consistency, of living our beliefs and our phrase, saying what we mean, meaning what we say, feeling both our Jewish roots and our sense of integrity. We have an honest sense of roots too. We don't simply claim we do what the Torah says, when we know there's plenty of things the Torah says that we would not want to do at all. But when the Torah says, love your neighbor as yourself, do not oppress the worker by withholding their wages, care for the widow and the orphan, there are wonderful statements there too. We can claim those honestly if we admit where the discontinuities lie. We also have a sense of creativity. If the words of Oseh Shalom, he will make peace for in the heights and for all Israel, doesn't speak to us, we can take that melody and tweak the words to sing Na'aseh Shalom, we make peace, Aleinu for us, V'al kol ha'olam, for all the world, not just for our people. And so we have that inheritance and creativity working in tandem, giving us both roots and wings. We have a deep sense of a cultural Judaism, which means we can learn from Jewish text and from Jewish music and from Jewish art and from Jewish food and from Jewish history and lived experience. All of those intelligences, ways of learning, pathways through the Jewish experience are meaningful, important, and crucial to us. They count as doing Jewish too. We provide a tangible inspiration. We need uplift too. Whether we call it spirituality or joy or inspiration or beauty, we need beautiful music. We need art. We need poetry, not just prose. We need those moments that make us stop talking and reflect and exist and remember. We provide that without the baggage, without the adding on, the imagination beyond plausible. We give tangible inspiration. And most importantly, we find that people come not by guilt. They come for joy. They come for community, for uplift, and for positive emotions. And so if we had to pick a slogan for the next 25 years, or 30 years, or 50 years of humanistic Judaism, let's work on less oi and more joy.